My name is Dora Marinova, and this is Talia Raphaely, and we are both from Curtin University Sustainability Policy Institute, and we were so sure you will remember our names that we didn't bring any business cards. But as long as you remember CASP and Curtin University, you'll be able to find us. I want to thank Cockburn Council for organizing this lunchtime seminar and bringing this beautiful food. And I also want to thank you for being here because Talia and I feel very passionate about this topic, and we really want to spread the knowledge around and have more people contribute towards a better flexitarian world. And before we start, I have a quiz question which comes with a little prize as to what flexitarianism is. Wow, wow, that's it. Well done. Okay, so flexitarianism was voted the most useful word in 2003 in the American dialect by the American Dialect Society, and this was essentially when the word was discovered and started to be in common usage. That was also the year when we invented the word texting. But texting is something that everybody knows, while flexitarianism hasn't picked up as quickly as texting. Last year, however, flexitarianism was listed for the first time in a dictionary. It was the Merriam-Webster College Dictionary. So it is a very mainstream word these days. However, what Talia and I have been doing is look deeper into the issues surrounding meat consumption, and we've come up with a definition which is a little bit more strict, and it's essentially very well picked up. What was your name, sorry? By that. So flexitarianism could be broadly defined as part-time or flexible vegetarianism. But if we want to look into while we're doing that, we're linking it into issues which are related to the global livestock influence and the destruction caused on the planet, as well as with the issue about sustainability and how we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions, how we can reduce water usage, and how we can preserve forests, how we can look after the planet. The definition that Talia and I have been working with is that flexitarianism has two sides. One is production of meat, and the other one is consumption of meat. Deb's explanation related more to the personal, to the consumption side. And it's related to a voluntary reduction in personal consumption of meat within the guidelines recommended by reputable international and national health organizations.
When you say meat, do you include seafood, fish and seafood?
We refer mainly to red meat consumption. We'll talk about that as well. However, on the production side, we're talking about at least 25% reduction in the global current production of meat. The seminar, the things that we are going to talk about today are going to touch on three areas. Human health. Talia and I are not experts in human health, despite the fact that we've done a lot of reading, a lot of research, and actually this year I was on the NHMRC, National Health and Medical Council committee to decide where money should be invested in public health. But in our background, we are actually not that strong in human health. Despite that, there is a lot of evidence that's available to everybody, that's publicly available, that we all can benefit from. Ecological health is another issue, and this is where our sustainability background is very important. And the last one is related to animal welfare. I'll pass the gadget to Talia, but before doing that, I just want to say that Talia finished her PhD last year on this topic, and she actually saw it as a way to empower individuals, and she's been working ever since in this area.
Thanks, Dora. So this is really about empowering ourselves. It's really about freeing ourselves from misinformation and accessing facts and truth, and at least being in a position to start knowing the difference between what we're told and what is real. I think it's really, I find this, Dora and I always find this talk very difficult to give because it's confrontational and it challenges some very deep-seated beliefs in what our rights are and our individual choices should be. So please feel free to challenge us during the duration of this time together. Feel free to question. I thought there was a question there which I haven't forgotten, and I'm coming to you in a second. And feel free to ask as many things as you feel you want to and touch on. I think the most important thing is to realize that individually, if we all make little changes in our lives, collectively, we can make a huge difference. The first area we focus on is human health. As Dora said, we're not experts in human health specifically, but we do work very closely with doctors. We do publish with doctors who work on this topic with us and verify and confirm the information that we are researching and working with. So everything you're being told here has been verified, checked, and substantiated. This is the World Cancer Research Fund and the American Institute of Cancer Research. They have a regular update on this, and in 2011 they re-updated it to say people who eat red meat should consume less than 500 grams per week, very little of any to be processed. The reason for this is that there's a direct correlation between cancer and red meat consumption. Bowel cancer specifically, but a number of others, pancreatic cancers and a number of other cancers are directly related to high meat consumption. There are a number. The Australian dietary guidelines, which came out this year, the most recent ones, and Dora, please feel free to interrupt me, said that the consumption of not more than 455 grams per week is recommended.
And cooked, lean, red meat. So that's the meat that we should be eating, if at all.
Okay, so don't eat processed meat. Both guidelines essentially say never eat processed meat. I'll come to that in a second. But if you have a look at it, can any of you see this? Or is it too small?
Just
Okay. The United States consumption daily is around 330 grams.
Or the weekly, because the other figures refer to weekly.
The
It's
weekly.
2.3 kilos.
Australia's weekly is 2.1 kilos per person.
And that includes babies.
And includes babies, yep,
Vegetarians.
yep, vegetarians and everything. That's an average. Okay, all of these countries, and there are many, many more on the list, all of them, includes Bulgaria, Cuba, Mexico, the United Arab Emirates, Brazil, Greece, Germany, Italy, Denmark, Canada, Spain, Luxembourg, eat too much meat. They eat well above the global and our local dietary health guidelines. So clearly we're all eating a hell of a lot more than we should. Even at worst case scenario where we assume that some of that meat in that figure is thrown away or wasted, we're still eating well above the amounts we should be for our health. But we don't know that because we keep getting things like the well-being diet from the CSIRO, which is a government document that says eat red meat. So we're constantly told men need meat. Meat is good for you. But that flies in the face of all the medical evidence. Some of the other diseases that are related, they're particularly Western diseases, and they're materializing more and more in the West, are listed there. And I highly recommend those of you that are interested in this topic, check out this guy, Michael Greger. His website is called nutritionfacts.org. And if you subscribe to it, it's a free subscription. He'll send you a video or documentation. He basically gathers the most recent and up-to-date nutritional scientific research and findings and collates them into very easy to access 1 or 2 minute videos. So I recommend him. One of the ones that are worth watching is Uprooting the Leading Causes of Death. And that is a 1-hour video, but it's highly, highly recommended. And that's all just based on the most recent research out of the most recent medical journals. The other big and terrifying health aspect of meat consumption is that to meet the growing meat demand, factory farming is increasing. And what's happening with factory farming is you're breeding genetically modified animals, you're breeding them really fast, you're breeding them in intensive, confined conditions, which is leading to zoonotic diseases. Zoonotic diseases, everyone knows what a zoonotic disease is.
From animal to man,
Transmitted from animal to man, or humankind.
Humankind, I should say.
And they're finding, and I mean, we've been warned about this in 2004, the World Organization, Food and Agricultural Organization, the World Organization for Animal Health, all said factory farming is deadly for human health and well-being. It's a major factor in emerging zoonotic diseases. Ditto the Council for Agricultural Science and Technology, where they've all said the cost of increased farming efficiency, livestock farming efficiency, is an increased global risk of disease. All the viruses that we are fighting pandemically are threatening us, such as swine flu, are traceable back to factory farms. The most recent swine flu in 2008, 2009, was traced back to a pig farm in North Carolina. Worse, because of these incredibly confined and intensive and genetically adapted animals, we're having to feed them drugs with every meal. We're feeding them antibiotics. So when you have to go to your doctor to get a prescription for an antibiotic because they're scared, or we're being told that if we take too many antibiotics, we will develop a resistance. Antibiotics, the viruses will develop a resistance to antibiotics. It's not true. Because at the moment there's 63 billion livestock on the planet being slaughtered on the planet. Slaughtered, not just bred, slaughtered every year. There are only, and that was in 2010, there are only 7 billion people on the planet. So that's 9 animals per every person, including babies, elderly, whatever, vegetarians. So what that's saying is if all of those animals are fed antibiotics with every meal, think of what our antibiotic consumption is compared to that antibiotic consumption. 63 billion animals, every meal, every day. At least half the world's antibiotics are given to livestock in factory farms. In fact, it's probably closer to 80% of all antibiotics used globally are given to factory farmed animals. In the US, it's more than 90%. So your antibiotic use has zero to do with antimicrobial resistance in reality. And as Jonathan Safran Foer said, and for anyone interested in this area, I highly recommend this book. It's called Eating Animals. And he looked into this because he's a dad and he just wanted to see what was best for his children. And it's a highly moving, very readable, beautiful book, but very difficult. And he basically said our choice is very simple: cheap chicken or our health. Because we're looking at a very possible future when we're forced to accept the loss of antibiotics as a tool to prevent human suffering. Further, what's happening is as more and more people start to eat meat, so more and more people are starting to get Western diseases. So what we're doing is we're combating the diseases of poverty with the diseases of wealth. Now the diseases of wealth cost a hell of a lot more because people live longer, they live sicker. In fact, in the last decade, cancers attributable to a meat-rich diet have increased 4 times, have exceeded 4 times the annual HIV infections. Okay, so non-communicable diseases related to bad nutrition are now exceeding the communicable diseases that were related to poverty and lack of hygiene and sanitation.
Is that globally or is that in?
That's globally. It's globally, and a lot of that's happening in the developed world as the developed world develops. So as people get rich, one of the things associated with wealth and affluence is meat, and the right to eat meat. The countries that eat the least meat are Rwanda, Bangladesh, countries like that, where meat's a treat. Oh, and then of course the religious countries. What I find particularly alarming, or equally alarming, is that everyone says overpopulation is the reason we have hungry people. And I'm sure, is there anyone here who hasn't heard that argument? Mm-hmm. We've all heard it. We're hungry because people in India are having families of 10. Not true. We're producing enough food right now to feed 12 million people. Using the current water resources we have, using the current land we have, but we're feeding it to animals. So people can eat more meat in wealthier countries. Right now, we are producing enough food for everyone now and into the foreseeable future, at least for the next 40 years. Yet global hunger continues to rise, and so does global poverty, because we're feeding grain to animals instead of people. Just a quick calculation, just to help you visualize what that really means, is in 2008-2009, the Food and Agriculture Union said we produced just over 2.2 billion tons of cereals. 800 million tons of these were fed to livestock. That's the minimum. That's a third of that part, but it's actually, some say it's more than that, some say it's a half. Some say it's at least 1 billion tons is fed to livestock. Now, if the average human needs 180 kilos of grain to survive, the quick calculation is that 800 million tonnes at the lowest conservative estimate, divided by 180 kilograms, will give us enough food for an additional 4.4 billion people. But there are only 1 billion people starving at the moment. So we'd have enough food with current production levels, if we all ate less meat, or no meat, to feed another, to end poverty, to end hunger as we know it, and feed an additional 3 billion plus people. Not using a drop more water, a drop more land, in fact using significantly less. And you'll often hear the argument, if you choose to eat less meat, that well then you're eating more grains. But actually, despite low direct cereal consumption, meat eaters eat more cereal indirectly through the meat they consume. And as climate change and global warming creates more unpredictable, chaotic weather events, so farmers are going to turn more and more to a grain supply, because it's a global resource, not a local resource, so it's more predictable in terms of fodder and feed. So in times of drought, in times of flood, animals that were traditionally range-fed for a period will now become grain-fed. And it's really interesting, because as the world gets richer, so malnutrition and obesity increase directly in proportion to hunger. So the Great Divide is going to grow, and for the first time in history we have 1 billion obese people and 1 billion starving people. And they're directly related, because being overweight is using resources that could end poverty. So the richer we get and the more we overconsume meat, the more grain is taken away. So that's really important. Excessive meat consumption, not overpopulation, is the problem, no matter what people tell you. It's very easy to blame others, but that's not the case. What's happening is we've got an increasingly sick Western population and an increasingly sick population in developing countries. China's health rates are plummeting, and all those other countries that are increasingly absorbing a Western diet that's meat-rich are increasingly developing diseases that are very expensive to treat and very difficult to live with, if not life-threatening. That's human health in a nutshell. The ecological health component, and please guys, feel free to interrupt me.
I'm just going to say, when
Yes.
you said grain-fed animals,
Yes.
you didn't add that a lot of the grain, like corn, has got genetically modified now.
Further.
So that's a whole other story that's
Right.
affecting us.
In order to produce quantities of meat, blah, blah, blah.
Can I just make a comment that you're
Yes.
talking about? There'll be 1 billion obese people and 1 billion starving people. But from a Western diet and rich point of view, you can't blame that solely on meat, surely, because you look at other industries such as the fast food industry, which is a lot of foods that are nutritionally deficient,
Correct.
which subsequently causes obesity, which
Yeah.
is high simple sugars in them, and so
Yeah.
on. As a result, people want to eat more and eat more and eat more.
Yes.
I believe, if it's fair to say, there's a bigger picture which is larger than that. Obviously you can't spend all day talking about this, but to me there's a much bigger picture than that. From a financial influence from multinationals,
Correct.
you can actually influence the governments.
Correct.
I mean, you drive
But
down,
they do, negatively.
Yeah, you drive down Rocking Road here,
That's the point.
and you see KFC, McDonald's, Hungry
Correct.
Jack's, all the crap.
Not
food
one of
that
which
they-
offers fast vegetarian food.
I'm sorry?
Not one of which offers fast vegetarian food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a salad you can have
There's
apparently,
a-
which is a friend of mine.
I think there's a vegetable burger, vegetarian burger as well.
There is
I
People
know.
don't stop at McDonald's to get the veggie burger.
I know.
I've never had a McDonald's veggie burger, and I never will. So I've been a vegetarian.
But again,
for
that
37
comes
years.
down to the dollar, because you'll see that I'm not aware of any McDonald's or takeaway places that are established in affluent areas. There's none in Peppermint Grove, there's none in Dalkeith,
I know.
there's none in Cottesloe.
Correct. Correct.
So that's an educational thing as well. And I believe,
You're absolutely right. Sorry, I don't know your name.
Stuart,
Absolutely. And this is a lot of the work that Dora and I are doing, is around the policies and the inequities, the lies, the lack of information, the disinformation, the lack of education, the reasons behind all of that. And of course it's a much bigger picture and it's much more complex. But essentially there are no vegetarian fast food chains. Yes, meat fast food chains may offer a vegetarian alternative, but essentially fast food is cheap meat. And the fact that you'll then have a lousy roll with it, which is packed full of, nutritionally deficient products and production things, and a whatever you get, a milkshake that's made out of pork fat and an ice cream. It's all associated to dumping in a cheap meal, and it's all associated to feeding the masses, and this whole myth that cheap meat is food security. But yes, Stuart, absolutely, it's very complex. But what people are finding is that this increase in meat consumption and this proliferation of such fast food places suddenly looms as one of the biggest environmental crises we're now facing. And meat consumption is one of the gravest threats to long-term sustainability of humankind. And this is Jonathan Porritt, who's a pretty, he's currently head of the UK government's Sustainability Development Commission, but he's been through a number of significant global NGOs working on this over the last 2 decades. And so that's not said lightly, and that's not said by a behemoth, that's said by a government official, and the UK is one of the leaders in trying to mitigate increasing and unhealthy meat consumption. And they're having a lot of trouble with it because people feel that it's their right, it's a lifestyle right and choice. Climate change, you've all seen it. You've all seen the impacts of climate change. The world's in crisis wherever you look. We've got extreme weather events happening, whether they're drought, floods, storms, all over the world. Our kids are growing up in a pretty bleak place, in fact. And there's all kinds of post-traumatic stress disorders starting to happen, farmers having to walk off their land, farmers losing crops. There's a whole lot of stuff going on that's mentally affecting our children's sense of security and sense of the future. And the world's going to become increasingly hard to live in. Gone are the days of blissful environmental escapes. It's going to become challenging. It's going to become hotter, drier, wetter, harsher. It's going to have devastating effects. And we have to implement technological solutions, but we also have to find ways to change the way we behave, because the solution doesn't lie purely in technological solutions. At the moment, if we're going to be able to survive comfortably on the planet, comfortably, and that's a relative term, we've got to stop temperature change at 2 degrees. But if you look at the records, you'll see temperatures are just climbing every year. It's always the hottest year on record. It's always the hottest year on record. And that's not changing. Technological solutions have benefits because a lot of the polluting mechanisms that are causing global warming are actually also doing what they call global cooling, which is helping to prevent some of the rays from reaching the Earth through pollution. So if we stop doing those immediately, global warming is going to shoot up. So in fact, we need to find ways that allow technology to phase in whilst allowing a little bit of pollution to continue while we gently stop climate change. Out of sheer interest,
Just move back to,
out of sheer interest, does anyone know what some of the estimates say? There's an onion bag for that. Does anyone know what the estimated impact of the livestock industry, what the estimated impact of the livestock industry is on climate change? How much of global greenhouse gases do you think might be attributable to, as a percentage?
60%?
60% is not very far off. Why do you say 60%?
I just think it's not just what the livestock are doing,
Yep.
but what is getting fed into them as well.
Absolutely.
That's taking
You're
resources.
absolutely right about that.
So it's not just.
Any other guesses?
I think it was over 60, and it's like the gases that come from them as well as
Methane.
the
I think 60 is close enough.
yeah.
Yes, it is longer. It's actually 51%. But that's huge if you stop and think about it. Now, we know that. In 2001, the Australian Greenhouse Gas Office reported that our livestock subsector is the nation's largest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, but they're not taxed under any carbon tax or emissions trading legislation at all. 13% of Australia's total national emissions, agriculture is exempt. Under all schemes, 18% of the world's total greenhouse gases was the Food and Agriculture Organization in 2006. In 2009, the World Watch Organization and subsequently the World Bank and the International Finance Organization have said it's at least 51% right now.
And this is because of the factors that you just mentioned. Sorry, what was your name?
Navaz.
Nevada. Exactly the factors that you said, the methane and the grazing and the full picture.
Production.
The loss of
Yeah,
land,
the loss of land.
the loss of forests, whatever. And in fact, and so this figure is still held, the World Bank and the International Finance Organization still hold to this figure. So that's now 2009 figure. The guys who did that study work for the World Bank and the International Finance Organization and are supported by them. And this in 2010, a study warned of a livestock greenhouse gas boom, where the production of livestock will, in the next 2 decades, single-handedly, just the livestock sector will overshoot safe levels of climate change. So no matter what else we do, we're doomed if meat production and consumption continues going as it's going. And I don't say that lightly. Okay? And these are the reasons As you were saying, there's a lot of burping. 95% is burping. Only 5% is farting. Okay, everyone blames cows for farting, but it's actually the burping that's a big problem. But what's terrifying is our production process is growing. I don't know if any of you have seen in the news, we've just signed a memorandum of understanding with China, which is one of the most populous countries on earth, which is increasing in, it's developing fast and it's increasing in meat consumption significantly. We've just signed an MOU with them to send cattle there. That's going to double our livestock production in Australia in the next decade, that market. Farmers already are lobbying the Victorian government to allow grazing in mountain class A reserves in Victoria, all those skiing resorts are going to be grazed in summer. Also, to make more money, we're trying to add nitrogen to cattle feed because cows then feel full quicker, but that increases their methane production. So economically it's viable, but from a climate change point of view, it's deadly. And this is just to give you a sense, even though we're only growing about 3 billion, by 2050, per capita demand is more than going to double. The reason that sheep and goats is flatlined is because that's traditionally in subsistence economies. So it's not in economics. And cattle and meat production, I just did this, is just rising up really, really fast. You can just see it's just an exponential growth process from 1961 to 2009. So you see that. So that's the worldwide meat production. It's just growing from 1961, just over 54 million tons, to 2010, where we had almost 300 million tons. So if that's what's happened in the last 40, 50 years, imagine what's going to happen in the next 40 or 50 years. Just out of interest, this is the kilograms of consumed food, and this is a lovely document. It's easily available on the internet. If you just Google the Meat Eater's Guide to Climate Change by Hammerschlag, which was 2011, it just pops straight up. And he just looked at the full life cycle of greenhouse gas emissions from common proteins and vegetables. And you can see right up here, lamb and beef are right up there. Whereas you look at lentils and stuff, they're right down here. Dry beans, tofu, etc.
Cheese is very high as well, so we're eating cheese.
And there's your salmon, tuna, chicken, turkey. It's all up here. That's all meat except for that, which is livestock still.
So kangaroo and emu.
It's a common question.
They're not there.
They're not there.
No, but
They're
they
not
would
there.
be what with lentils? Would they? I mean, they're so low impact on the environment.
It hasn't been
Because they're so low impact, aren't they?
I don't believe it's been calculated. I don't believe there'd be a problem. And that's what the British government are doing now. They're saying eat less but eat best.
Yeah.
And in the Australian context, that would be eat less but eat best.
Yes.
So eat the best you can afford, but eat less of it. So rather buy more expensive or more unusual meat and eat less of it
Yes.
than eat mass-produced factory farm meat. So in that, to answer to your question, if you want to eat, or if you're eating meat anyway, whatever quantities you're eating, go for that sort of meat. So it's significantly less damaging and destructive to your health as well, obviously.
Yes.
If you don't have the antibiotics, you don't have the genetic modification. In terms of your pocket and the bottom line, it was interesting. This study was done in 2012. And it showed that a worldwide shift between 2010 and 2030 to a more vegetarian way of life will reduce costs significantly. Now this looks like a global cost, but there is no ways that global financial mitigation efforts aren't going to affect our bottom line. Okay, no matter where you look at it, from whatever debt crisis or global financial crisis you look at, we're going to end up paying in some way or another, and rates and taxes. I mean, I've got friends who live in Queensland, Cottesloe, the city of Cottesloe, has got a document on their website describing the impact of climate change on ratepayers and land. Yep.
Can I just add? You're right there because
Yep.
the farmers and the meat industry, etc., heavily subsidised by the taxpayer, and the real cost of that steak is to produce, apart from the environmental, through the taxpayer, it's heavily taxpayer
Correct.
subsidised.
Fuel subsidies,
Heavily.
land subsidies, it's part of our research.
Yeah.
We didn't put it in here because it was a bit complex for this kind of condensed chat.
Yeah.
That's absolutely spot on. Sorry, I don't know your name.
Andrew.
Andrew.
Yeah.
Andrew, thanks for that. Absolutely, the subsidies and the support given to farmers is our we pay for. And the more climate change impacts on them, the more we're going to be paying for it. Not to mention, Cottesloe, for example, Town Cottesloe is looking at costs, and you can have a look on their website, they're looking at costs that global warming is going to have on sea level rise, like all those beachfront properties, Rockingham. Queensland's already eroding. People on beachfront properties are paying huge amounts of special levies to try and retard the erosion of their building, the land their buildings are on. And that's going to happen more and more and more. So essentially a low meat diet will decrease cost by 50%. So that's a flexitarian diet, or by $20 trillion. A completely meatless diet, 70% reduction in mitigation costs for climate change, and a completely vegan diet by 80%. Now, stabilizing atmospheric concentrations of 450 parts per million is assuming that we stop at 2 degrees. So we've still got a little bit of room for climate change to carry on. How are we doing on time? Okay. Very, very quickly, it also has a massive impact on water depletion and degradation. Livestock industry, they're the single greatest sectoral source of water pollution. The single sectoral source. Don't blame factories. Livestock. Just to give you a sense, and this is a very rough calculation because the amount of water for a kilo of beef is very variable depending on where the beef is raised, if the calculation is done on carcass weight or meat weight or live weight. So this is just a very rough indication to give you a sense of the kind of quantities, but give or take, it'll only make a difference of 50 or 100 days. It won't make a massive difference. If the average Australian, if you, me, all of us use about 220 litres of water per day per person, 1 kilo of beef on average uses about 450 days of your water use. So every time you eat a steak, you're using over a year's worth of water. Take that same sort of rough calculation to someone in Bangladesh who uses an average of 5 litres of water per day per person, and you're talking about 55 years of water on average. So what? So maybe it's 40, maybe it's 40, maybe it's 30 years of water, depending on how that beef was raised. But you're still talking about a significant use of water. 55 years plus minus of water per person in every kilo of steak. So if you're eating within the healthy guidelines, that's 2 weeks worth of steak. Also, 30% of all total land use is used by the livestock industry. They use a total of 70% of all agricultural land. 30% of the total land surface, 26% of the world's total ice-free surface, and 33% of all arable land is used for livestock. Already, we're at Earth's carrying capacity as it stands at current consumption levels without seeing those graphs. Okay, already we're at Earth's carrying capacity. Just to bring it close to home, over 50 football fields of Australian native trees, wildflowers and wildlife habitat are destroyed every hour by the livestock industry. 3,000 to 7,000 square kilometres of native woodland are cleared every year just for improved cattle pasturing, and most of which is exported. And now wait for this memorandum of understanding with China to come into play. A lot of that's going to come out of Queensland. What's going to happen to Queensland's forests and native bush? 86% of vegetation clearing in Queensland since 1997 was to create pasture land. 10% of that was for crops, and the remaining 4% was forest mining, infrastructure and settlement. So 86% of it was livestock. And that's only set to worsen unless we change. Biodiversity threats biodiversity at its highest rate ever, and most of it is related in one way or another to livestock farming and loss of habitat. Essentially, as Peter Singer said, Peter Singer is a philosopher, you may have come across him. He is currently the Vice Chancellor of Princeton University, I believe. He comes out of Melbourne, he was RMIT, head of the philosophy department. He said we're quite literally gathering the future of our planet for second-hand learners. And Lyman is an ex-livestock farmer American, said to consider yourself an environmentalist and still eat meat is like saying you're a philanthropist who doesn't give to charity. I'm going to race through this one. It's too confrontational. I'm not going to put you through it. I said there are little people around. So we'll go very quickly through this. But essentially, animals are sociable, intelligent, feeling beings. Chickens are smart. They nurture their eggs. They cluck to their eggs. Their chicks, 3 days before birth, the hens start pecking on the eggshell. The chicks start pecking back. In Australia, 488 million chickens are slaughtered per year. That's almost 500 million. That's a lot of chickens. Only 4% are free range, including 2% of that 4%, which are organic. The sad part about it is that they're bred for breasts, because breasts are the biggest selling part of the chicken. So, I'm going to change from there because it's too confrontational. It's equally confrontational. So what happens is after 10 days, their legs can't carry their weight. But the beauty of this is they put them all into a shed, feed them mechanically, they don't see human beings, and then take them all out when they're ready for slaughter at 37 days. So for 37 days, those chickens are growing in their own mess and litter. But when they fall, they land in it. So most of the chicken that you're eating and being sold has been heavily disinfected with a toxic substance to try and kill the germs that are intrinsic in it. Yeah. I took my little one to SciTech a few months ago. Won't go back because they have chickens to show the scientific process of eggs, chicken, blah, blah, blah. They get the chicks from a farm. They go back to the farm as soon as they start looking like this. That chicken was 9 days old. That was at SciTech. It's inevitable. They're genetically modified. They cannot stand up. That's the chicken you eat when you go to the supermarket and buy cheap chicken.
So sorry,
Yes.
what about the chickens that are in people's backyards? They,
No problem.
I know, but they don't seem to be falling over after 9 days.
No, they're not as genetically modified, and they actually keep a lot of that stock separate. And that stock, most farms will breed genetically modified chickens from their own stock, traditionally, or from farm stock. The chickens you're buying at
For the backyard.
city farmers are traditionally not genetically modified chickens. Or city farm. Wherever animals are handled and slaughtered en masse, it's 300 cows an hour in the average Australian slaughterhouse. You cannot kill 300 huge animals humanely in 1 hour. Can't do it. I'm not going to show you this video, but for those of you who want to know the truth, we think Australia is civilized, we blame Indonesia, we blame the Far East, the Middle East. This was a video that I edited for my PhD. It was filmed at Gippsland in November 2011 in Victoria. I urge you, if you're interested, to have a look at these websites. Animals Australia will have this footage. The Australian Pig Farming Inside Story website will also tell you about pig farming and pig slaughter in Australia. Not civilized. Not by anyone's definition. Do any of you know Lynn White? Yeah? She's an ex-policewoman from Adelaide. She's a wonderful, beautiful woman in her mid-40s. I don't know how she stays calm. She's been doing all these investigations in abattoirs around the world. I don't know where she finds the strength and the courage. She was a policewoman until she was a detective in Adelaide. She said that nothing that she saw in terms of child abuse or any other kind of abuse in the police force comes anywhere close to what she sees in the slaughterhouses. And she says the thing that's scariest about that is not what we're doing to others, it's what it's doing to ourselves. Because of the behaviours it condones and allows in humanity. She was also the 2012 ABC News Lady of the Year. She's a moderate woman, this woman. She's not, by any means, your traditionally portrayed hippie or vegetarian. She's a policewoman. She's a newsmaker. She's worth having a look at. She's on the ABC. She's on the Animals Australia website, ABC website. She said that while watching some of that Australian abattoir footage, she reflected for the first time that for the first 38 years of her life she ate animals, completely unaware of the existence of factory farms and ignorant of what animals experience in slaughterhouses. Becoming informed was life-changing. No one had reminded me that eating animals is a choice. That regulations and standards in Australia didn't protect these animals from extreme cruelty, and that even if these regulations had, the animals would still have been afraid, and they still would have suffered because you're taking life away from animals that are young. The story of their final moments is so seldom known or told, yet it desperately needs to be told because we live on, we still have choices to make. They need us to make informed and compassionate ones. They don't have choices, and of course we do. So, summary and where to from here. If we don't find a way to eat less meat, there are going to be continuing climate change health-related problems. Okay, so climate change brings about a number of health problems, and meat-related health problems. There are going to be the direct and indirect health effects of excessive meat consumption, huge economic costs, including not just mitigating climate change. And you've got also the diseases associated with the diseases of poverty rather than affluence, diabetes, obesity, heart disease, hypertension, all the things, cancers that we're starting to see increasing everywhere. People are living longer but sicker, and new generations are expected to have much shorter life expectancies, to the point where some people are actually predicting they're going to die before their parents. meat. Food insecurity for developing countries, destruction of global life support systems. This is something Dora and I are very, very close to. These are some of the benefits of Flexitarianism. And now we get into the fun part. What can we do? And this is directed both at councils. Shall I keep going? This is directed both at councils and at individuals, okay? These are the benefits of making the choice to eat less meat. And you can read them, you can all see them. Yep. I don't think, personally, knowing what I know, that meat consumption should be a matter of personal choice. Because it's affecting the global commons. It's abusing the global environmental commons, and it's abusing the public health system. 2 more minutes is all I need. So, I think that if we tax cigarettes, because that needs to be paid for in the public health system, it needs to subsidise the public health system for the lung cancers and other related things. We tax alcohol, we tax petrol, we tax energy. Why aren't we taxing meat?
Because we're subsidising it.
Correct. And why are we subsidising it?
Because it's unsustainable on its own.
We are subsidising it because there are a lot of corrupt politicians and businessmen. And if you follow the Monsanto story, you'll see what the food industries came from. For councils, we encourage them to have a meat-free day, as in the UK. Veggie street maps where the vegetarian restaurants don't go to McDonald's, go to another one down the road, it's not far away, there's a hidden pantry or something else. Eat meat as a treat. Make nutritional recommendations like our most recent dietary recommendations. Support alternative diets. Have education initiatives similar to anti-smoking and anti-suntan, because my hat. Excessive meat eating is as dangerous as sunburn and smoking. Certainly, give your kid a piece of bacon or give your kid a cigarette, pretty similar dangers.
I also think you could add banning cooking programs on television.
Absolutely agree with you.
They do nothing about improving health.
We
at
actually
all.
got that in one of our documents. We didn't put it in this one.
And
but
they're
it's
prolific.
terrifying.
The
Terrifying.
cake ones at the moment.
Terrifying. And we need to start lobbying. And if we can't lobby, at least in our local council mode. You know, we need to think of ways. We need to get together and work out ways. Because seriously, those cooking programs sell meat. I can't watch them. I can't watch them. And as you were saying, internalising externalities, you know, more GST, more expensive because mass-produced meat, which seems cheap, which is cheaper to buy, is actually the most costly to produce in terms of environmental health and other aspects. So it was what we were saying about less is best. Eat less meat, but the best kind you can get, and based on all these criteria. Seriously, replacing meat with plant-based foods, or some of your meat consumption with plant-based consumption, offers a much more rapid impact on reducing greenhouse gas emissions and their atmospheric contribution than any other action to replace fossil fuels with renewable energies. Just a 25% reduction in global meat production, which is directly related to consumption and demand, would significantly reduce. But remember guys, this whole talk, government, councils, whatever, this is about what we can do. And I would strongly recommend, and be happy to put this up on the Cockburn website if Jen wants or anywhere else, get rid of all the cheap meat in your freezer and fridge. Get rid of the chicken. Or finish it, eat it, and don't replace it. Don't supermarket shop on an empty stomach yet. Not while you're getting used to a new flexitarian diet. We decide to go that route. Get your family on board, depending if you the cook or the shopper, voluntarily or involuntarily, forcefully. Plan ahead. Look for diets, look for menus, talk to me, talk to Dora, we'll give you some ideas. 20-minute meals, flexitarian meals. Try cook a vegetarian meal you've never cooked before. Or substitute, make a bolognese. Substitute some of the meat with beans. Leave some meat in, put 50% beans. Eat generously, guys. If you're hungry on a flexitarian diet, it's because you're not eating enough of the good stuff. Eat more fruit and veggies. Stay motivated. Keep watching those videos on the Animal Wealth, on the Animal Australia's website and other places. Look at the most recent effect of climate change on someone, or some kid on someone. Remember what you're doing. Seek support and advice, dinner clubs, cooking clubs, group clubs, maybe councils will get on board with all of this. Educate yourself. I highly recommend these resources. I'm happy to give it to Jen if you want to give her a ring. Or you're welcome to give Dora and I a ring. We'll give you our number. Forks Over Knives, the Michael Greger website I spoke about, Engine to Diet, Earthlings, Peaceful Kingdom, Ghost in Our Machine, all things that will help you stay motivated and educated. What the hell, guys? Give it a go. You've got nothing to lose. There are so many books on Flexitarianism. This week Dora and I just took this out of a page, an Amazon.com page, I think. But honestly, this was a one second search. They're available. They're not inexpensive. They're not unobtainably expensive.
Is there a particular one you'd recommend? Because it all feels overwhelming.
I'll give you my number and you can stay in touch, but there are any number. But the Flexitarian table's a lovely book. The Part-Time Vegan's a lovely book. And there are so many websites that I can recommend, and we'll give you our contact details in a second and stay in touch. And essentially,
So, this is for what Mr. Shepherd saying, that you can do a lot of things with technology, but the only individual choice that can have direct impact on global warming and climate change is what we eat. Or as he's saying it, is the choice of where to stick your fork. So we have a lot of power as individuals. Nobody can tell us what we like to eat, but we need to be properly informed and to know the truth behind some of the stories. These are publications with Talia and myself, and the one that's probably very interesting, but it hasn't come up yet, is the International Journal of User-Driven Healthcare, because this is where we actually discuss how much secrecy is there and how the people cannot access the right information, and the myths behind certain diets that have been actively promoted by John Howard and the American diet as well. So we still need
My Pledge, American Diet.
Yeah.
Harvard came out with a direct response to
even
it.
by my
Yes.
healthcare fund,
Bupa.
yes, they also do not give you the right information. So, eating less meat is the most powerful and valuable change anyone can make, and that essentially gives us hope when we teach in our Masters in Sustainability and Climate Change Policy. When we give the lecture on food, everybody has this sense of relief, because anything to do with renewable energy, anything to do with infrastructure or transport, you have big requirements of investment and subsidies and political will. When it comes to food, we are all in charge of what we eat and how we do it. So change the world as we might come to know it. It can help us end all type of suffering for current generations and future generations, and it can create a more connected, compassionate world for everybody on the planet. And there is a long list of sources that essentially justify all these claims that we've been made here. So thank you.
Jennifer, it's all right. I'm just going to type mine and Dora's email address, and anyone's welcome to
Yes.
contact us on that.
Can I just ask you a question?
Yes.
I know you had cheese in the in your graph.
Yeah.
What about milk? You had yogurt as well. Is that so? Is milk included? I didn't know if there was a
We need to go
category
back to
for
see whether-
milk.
I think milk was there.
I saw
Obviously-
yogurt and I saw
Yeah.
cheese.
Obviously, the longer the processing time takes, the more carbon intensive the product is. With cheese, this is the worst. Yogurt is actually very beneficial from a health point of view because of the culture that health creates in the stomach. However, the intake that you need is very small per day. And again, our lecture here is saying to you, don't eat a lot of milk, a lot of animal products, a lot of meat, but you can still have some. And yogurt is one of these products which is actually quite beneficial. Even like a couple of spoons, that's all that's in
And
it.
particularly if you can go for organic yogurt, and again, the same principle applies. Go less, but go the best quality you can afford. Because if you have the organic yogurt, you won't have the growth hormones, you won't have the antibiotics, you won't have the steroids, you won't have less protein and less impact of better farming methods.
Yeah. And biologically, this is the milk is where everything gets stored in an animal or in the human. So if you have to eat one thing that is organic, it has to be dairy products. Forget about lettuce, forget about everything else. It's much more concentrated in the milk.
Toxin.
So what is another substitute for milk? Like soy milk, obviously.
Rice milk, almond milk.
Almond milk is
Certainly has rice milk.
rice milk, yep, almond milk, soya milk.
There are some
A lot of people
disagreements
use-
in relation to
yeah,
soya milk
yeah.
because a lot of the soya is genetically modified.
So get organic, for sure get organic. Yeah. Organic soy milk particularly. But also a lot of people, if you start getting into whole foods and whole food eating, use things like coconut milk in their smoothies and things like that. Instead of using milk in a smoothie, put coconut milk in your smoothie. And as I say, talk to Dora and I. We'll be in touch with you about this. But there are a lot of alternatives. I use soy milk at home. It's controversial, organic soy milk.
And there's Australian soya milk, organic.
Yes, yes.
Coles just started, I think it's called 5 a.m. Organic yogurt
Yes.
line. That's really but everything has to be new.
But having said which, I used to take much longer to shop than I do now because I know where everything is now. I know what I'm looking for. So I know where the organic yogurt is. I know where the organic whatever eggs are, whatever.
Sorry, you probably said it before when I was about fish and stuff.
Fish has a lot of health benefits. Again, if you're eating less and you're eating best. Canned tuna is toxic and should never be eaten. And they're finding that all blue tuna is highly radioactive. Post Fukushima, you cannot get non-radioactive tuna. And plus there's all the heavy metals and heavy mercuries and stuff. So source sustainable fish from sustainable fisheries. And if you have a look on you'll look for Australian sustainable fisheries, you'll get the fish types and the fisheries that do sustainable fishing. And factory fish are really bad for you. They're bad for the environment, they're bad for you. And again, they're full of antibiotics. And all of them.
If you catch your own.
If you catch your own, pretty cool. But don't eat too. You have a particular propensity for storing.
Are you going to do this again, like in a different time, not in the middle of the day? I just wonder if you do evening ones.
More than happy to.
Yeah.
Our mission truly is to give people facts to make decisions. That's Dora and I spend a lot of energy and time on that.
Yeah, I just thought like my husband would be interested too, but but I'll have a look on the net at some of these things you've said too and get some talking to him.
And be in
about
touch because we will do regulars.
Fantastic.
We've done it lots of times
Yes.
on Saturdays, Sundays.
All right, that would be good. Yes.
Would you consider, like with the Cockburn Council, doing a course? I know there's a Living Smart course, but something similar to that, concentrated on
Jenny
food.
about it. I'll talk to Jenny, but absolutely. And in fact, Dora and I started putting together with one of our colleagues a low carbon cookbook. So which all will be under 20-minute meals, quick and easy. So it's a low carbon collaborative cookbook. So a carbon conscious collaborative cookbook, which will be freely available on the internet. So we'll be in touch on it. But yeah, we have spoken about. We'll talk to Jenny.
We have one more list.
Yeah. Does anyone have a really good question? Jenny, you got a really good one to ask someone to answer.
Okay, whoever asked the last question gets the bag.
I was actually going to ask because my dad, he's for vegetarianism, but he says that he needs meat because he goes long periods in the day without eating, and he reckons it gets him through the day. So, what should I say to him?
Yeah. You're absolutely right. That's a big sales pitch for the meat industry. They talk about low GI foods and high protein. And in fact, that's what the total wellbeing diet, the CSIRO diet's based on, is that if you eat a very high protein diet, your body doesn't, your sugar levels, there are so many other sources of protein, Claire. I find that if I have a high carb meal, I'm hungry the next day. Like if I have a high carb meal at night, I'm very hungry when I wake up in the morning. Whereas if I have a higher protein meal, but I haven't eaten meat, chicken or fish for nearly 40 years. So my protein sources and anyone's protein sources, and I know ultra athletes who are vegans. I mean, I'm talking ultra athletes, guys who run for the Australian team, who don't eat meat. They don't need it they run for 24 hours. They never touch meat and they don't eat. Legumes, nuts, seeds, minimal amounts of dairy, minimal amounts of organic eggs. And then there are a lot of meat substitutes, which are really actually not bad at all. You know, there's the corn burgers you can pop in a toaster or any other kinds as well, which are quick and easy. And you'll be doing less damage to his health, amongst other things.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And those are lower GI than almost anything else, Claire.
Talia,
Yes.
just one question referring to all of this.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on extra vitamin tablets and anything like that?
Unfortunately, I'm not an expert on that, so I'm loath to answer that. We can ask one of our GP colleagues to answer that.
What about you personally? You said you've been a vegan.
I don't take anything. I take spirulina when I'm going through a particularly strong stress period. You know, when I'm really working 22 hours out of 24 for an extended period or whatever, I'll take spirulina. And my ultra athlete friends all swear by spirulina, but they reckon that we should get spirulina anyway into our diet, irrespective of how we eat. But other than that, frankly, I don't
even know what spirulina is.
It's seaweed. It's a seaweed derivative that you get in the tablet form. But they just say that's something that's been leached out of our soils, so we're lacking. But in all honesty, I don't take any supplements, and neither do any of my other vegetarian or vegan friends, ultra athletes, or anything else. If you eat a balanced vegan or vegetarian diet, you'll be getting much more nutritional benefit than on a meat diet. So in fact, if anything, theoretically you should significantly lower your
Well, I didn't
mineral
realise
vitamin
I've been one of
deficiencies.
these flexitarians
Yeah.
for years without knowing it.
How do you feel?
And it's fantastic, and I never take a pill of
You
any
look
type.
fantastic. No, I've never
And
taken that.
people say, oh,
Not
you
through
need,
pregnancy,
you
not
should, as
through
you get
anything.
older, take this, that, or the other. And I say, what for? I've got loads of energy. I feel fantastic. Why?
Well, I became vegetarian probably about 5 years ago, and I immediately noticed that my levels of energy increased. So, and we have this with some of our students. You know, the Hungarian boy who said that he's tried various diets, and he was always wanting to eat whatever he's not allowed to eat. But once you get the meat out of your diet, or reduce it, you actually don't crave it because you have the nutrition from the other food that you eat. And what Talia was saying, eat a lot of it. Eat a lot of it.
Eat as much fruit and veggies as you want,
Yeah.
and eat as many nuts as you want. You know,
Yeah.
they don't make that. The other thing that's really interesting is there's a guy called Mark Bittman who you should have a look at. He is the food critic for the New York Times, and he ended up with a hell of a lot of health issues, obesity, cholesterol, blah 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 blah. Anyway, he's just brought out some. I think he's brought out some articles, but he's Google vegan before sex, VB6. the VB6. He's become a vegan before sex because he still has to work and he still has to be a food critic. So he's become vegan before sex. Look at the health benefits. He's decreased all medication, all vitamin intake, all anything has gone in 3 months. And that's not even Mark Bittman, Bittman. Mark Bittman, VB6.
Thank you.
Why aren't doctors better informed? Just, I mean, like, doctors tell you that you've got to eat a certain amount of meat. Just, you know, that's...
Well, the thing is, you know, a lot of I don't know where to start. But
Start with the
probably-
pharmaceutical industry. Start with the pharmaceutical industry.
And the other thing is, if you look at the life expectancy of doctors is actually less than the life expectancy of the average population.
It's less, is it?
Yeah, it's less. Well, it's obviously a combination of factors. One is because they have quite a lot of stress, but also it's because they have access to medication very easily. And a lot of the reason for these medications are not to actually cure you, but to create certain dependence and keep you using it. So, yeah.
But in answer to that question further, Dora and I were looking at who are the big influencers on promoting, and I can see if you're anxious if you're not finishing. Who's promoting the livestock trade? The pharmaceutical industry is huge. Who's giving doctors conferences? Who's funding education initiatives for doctors? The pharmaceutical industry. They have 2 reasons to benefit. One, they're funding the livestock industry. They're making 80 to 90% of their income from the livestock industry, and the remaining 10 from sick people. So seriously, it's not in their interests to educate
And they're not
doctors.
going to let go easily.
They're not
Big
going to let
power
go
and a
easily.
lot of money.
And one day, guys, if we ever run another talk, we'll show you how power's consolidating in the hands of a few, like Roche.
The ETC report.
Yeah, the ETC report.
We might wrap it up there.
Yeah.
Any other questions, please ask them. And we've got some food left up the front for the rats.
Guys, thank you.
you.
Thank you for coming.